we're just walking around in some kind of fog. I think we're all in a trance. People are talking in symbols. Everyone's sort of floating through this fog of symbols and unconscious feelings. Here's another person who's existing in a dream, taking us into a dream world.
Hello, once again, and welcome back to the Lucid Dreaming Podcast. This is episode 5. I'm Jay, and I'm going to start this week by, again, a quick follow-up on last episode. There are some clarifications and some more information I wanted to give about some of the things I've talked about, including both brainwaves and meditation, and in fact, how they relate and correlate. So there's a lot of interest about meditation, and because it's becoming also more, I would say, mainstream or popular outside of spiritual circles, anywhere from tech startups and whole of Silicon Valley doing mindfulness meditation and so on. It's becoming even a sort of like productive practice. And again, as I mentioned, there's so many benefits to meditation, but in particular to lucid dreaming. Jamie Alexander, if I'm pronouncing his name right, has a nice blog called lucidability.com. I recommend to check it out. He wrote a few articles about meditation as it relates to the practice of lucid dreaming. I'll put a link in the show notes. But if you are going to pick up a meditation practice, I would highly recommend starting with a teacher, someone who has a lot of practice in it, who can guide you properly. I don't know of anybody who teaches meditation in relation to lucid dreaming, but as I said, I think lucid dreaming improvability or capability for lucid dreaming is just one of the side effects to meditation. And there's many reasons to that. I'm sure a few of them that we don't even know about. But one of them is practicing conscious awareness at the same time with deep states of consciousness. And that ties into the brainwaves. I thought to mention, I embedded the video of Ken Wilber connected to an EEG machine and showing how he's sort of manipulating his brain waves to indicate a few things. So here's where he mentions a lot of terms that are terms from meditation practices, Eastern traditions, some originally from Buddhism, and without a lot of knowledge about that and being familiar with those terms, that sounds like a lot of strange things. So maybe you did find it interesting and fascinating, but I just thought I'll sort of frame it a little bit more, because otherwise it can sound very strange or confusing. But he's doing various meditation practices and various states of consciousness that he's trying to achieve through particular types of meditations that correlate and show specific types of brain waves. And again, he's even mentioning at some part of this that longtime meditators gain a capacity for this conscious awareness throughout all states of consciousness, the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. Even in deep sleep, there is some sort of a basic awareness. And again, not getting too much into it, but it is indicating of continuing a conscious awareness throughout the dreaming state, which obviously translates to lucid dreaming. Whether you do or do not take control over the dream or try to manifest stuff or flying or do anything, you are aware that you're dreaming. And that's one of the things that he's talking about in the video. And the rest of it is being aware while being even in delta, which is deep dreamless sleep. So it's pretty cool how he can demonstrate this. And again, he's himself been a meditator for more than 30 years or 40 years at this point, I believe. So he has gained quite a remarkable capacity over his own brainwaves, and I don't think he talks about it in this video, but in other audio segments from him, he mentions how after such a long time and such a long practice of something like meditation and conscious awareness and so on, he and many other people who report the same thing has gained this sort of inert ability to become aware in their dreams almost automatically. So again, that's sort of the farther reaches of these kind of practices, but it gives you a very clear indication as to what it can achieve and what it can help do. And I thought, since we are talking about the combination of meditation, brainwaves, and lucid dreaming, or at least meditation, lucid dreaming, I thought I'd mention another thing that perhaps will add to the credibility of meditation, that doesn't lack in any scientific research at this point to validate its usefulness. But I would say that meditation is something that's being practiced for 2,000 years or more by these Eastern traditions. And regardless of, again, their so to speak, spiritual aspects or something like that, and I should point out that not everything that's been done and practiced for 2,000 years or more means by default that it's a good thing or a beneficial thing or something like that. That's not on its own an indication, but it can support it and it can indicate something if people continue to do it and improve it over the years. So lucid dreaming as a practice in the West, at least, was known more or less since the 70s, since the phenomena became, more commonplace, and then more scientific research came into it, and the occurrence itself of lucid dreaming has been proven scientifically, and it became a practice that's being taught. But as you can guess, since lucid dreaming is a natural phenomena, it has happened to people for many years, probably, forever, since some point in our brain's evolution, I suppose. That would be my guess. But I can tell you that lucid dreaming as a practice has been practiced for 2,000 years or more in these Eastern traditions. And in fact, it has a name. It's called dream yoga. And there are many books about it. I've read a couple of them. Dream Yoga, and the other one was The Yoga of Dream and Sleep. Sorry, the first one is Dream Yoga and the Practice of Clear Light. And I will not get into what the practice of clear light is, but I will mention that it connects to being consciously aware during the dreamless sleep segments of sleep. But again, I always worry about talking too much about the fringes of lucid dreaming, and I think in this episode I want to just go back to some more of the basics and in the practices and what can be done. But I do want to mention these things, probably because I myself, the more I practice lucid dreaming, the more I'm fascinated by these aspects, and maybe it's more for advanced, I don't know. But if you find it interesting, then the more the better, as far as I'm concerned. But just to finish about dream yoga, it has been practiced for many, many, many years in these traditions, and there are currently books about it, which are, again, it's fascinating. They're a little different. They're not your usual lucid dreaming books and lucid dreaming practices, and I think most people will find them a little bit strange, but it's interesting, and it's interesting to look at a different approach, and for again, a tradition that has been doing it for so long. So it's something to look into, and I will probably do an episode about dream yoga sometime in the future when we get a little more into this and a little more to what I still call the fringes of lucid dreaming, at least in our modern Western society, perhaps. So that's just the follow-up for this week. Now, I wanted to talk about, again, as I mentioned, to talk about the basics a little bit more, or at least what I would consider a good lucid dreaming practice sequence, or the core components, and then talk about my favorite method, my favorite induction method for lucid dreaming. At least the one I found is the one that for me was the most beneficial, the one that for me has been able to induce the most lucid dreams, I suppose. And that is WILD, the Awake Initiated Lucid Dreaming. So back to the practice sequence. I think there are these core components and I understand that when people start out, they read all this information, they find all these things, and it can be either overwhelming or they're one of those people who just dive into it and just start and just do everything that they can find and try every system. I think that might be a little tricky, and I think that might cause a sort of overwhelm, and maybe it's not even as efficient as it could be. But because if you're trying all these various methods, you're not perhaps not trying one of them just really really well and put more time into it. But I do believe that there are some sort of core components, smaller components than, let's say, one of the induction methods in particular, that you can do together. And if you find that you have the time and you have the ability to do all these little core components plus one induction method, then that might be very useful. So I'm going to give my little spiel and my little overview of it, and I highly recommend you do what you feel would work for you and what you can consistently do on a some regular basis. And as I mentioned probably in my first episode, I think the first and foremost, almost a must component. It's not a must, but it's I think it's so crucial that I would almost consider it a must, is a dream journal, or any kind of method in which you record your dreams. You can write them down, you can voice record them, but trying to basically the reason for a dream journal, first and foremost, is dream recall. And writing a journal or recording your dreams, just I'm honestly I'm not sure exactly the mechanism behind it or why it works, but it works in improving dream recall tremendously. And in fact, people who start off from not remembering dreams at all, if they do it consistently, almost all of them describe a sort of sequence of remembering little pieces here and there of a dream, and then eventually remembering a bigger part of a dream, and then remembering a full dream and multiple dreams, all the way to 5, 6, 7 dreams sometimes, with full sequences and really just rich, vivid dreams as time goes by, and the more they write dream journals. And as I mentioned in the first episode, people who write comprehensive, really deep dream journals, and they write a lot, start lucid dreaming almost naturally, just as a progression of dream recall. So that's just one thing, but again, I think for some people it takes a long time before that happens naturally in terms of just lucid dreaming, just becoming lucid naturally from good dream recall. But even if you write a little bit, if you have 5 minutes when you wake up in the morning to write down, just even though you don't have to write full sequences or entire dreams, but I suggest that you write something to keep the practice going of remembering and paying attention to your dreams even after you have woken up. So that's core component number one. It's the first part of the sequence, I believe. The second part is reality checks. And not everybody, as far as I know, practice reality checks on a regular basis, but again, reality checks are just to get in the habit of questioning your current state of awareness, your current state of consciousness, to whether you're dreaming or not. Is this a dream? And the reason is because dreams are a sort of reflection of our waking state. And in some ways, because of something that's going on in the brain, we don't even think about the weirdness of things that occur in a dream. Where in a sort, if you really think about it, we are in a sort of trance. We are sort of oblivious to the fact that something is weird, or this is not regular daily life. It's not super connected to our memories. I mean, there are a lot of our memories, and we recognize people in the dream, and we recognize situations and places, but we don't think about the last thing we've done, where we went to sleep, and where we are now, oh, I'm in a different country, in a different place, I don't even think about it because there's some disconnect in the parts of the brain or the parts of our awareness that are functioning on a regular dream. Now, it is a reflection of the daily life because in daily life, it may seem obvious, but because we have the assumption that we're awake and this is, of course, reality, until you start questioning it, you won't do the same thing in a dream. You rarely question whether you're awake or not in a dream because you never question that during waking life. Because once again, you assume. But if you really think about it, remember that you assume the same thing. You assume that this is real life and you're awake and everything's fine in your dream. It's a hidden assumption. You don't stop and think about it and make that assumption. It's a sort of subconscious assumption that yeah, this weird little situation is absolutely fine, and you never question it because you never question it just in general in life. And when you start questioning that and even checking through different methods whether you are awake or dreaming, then that habit of questioning comes into the dream state. So reality checks are things as simple as reading something that's written down on a sign, on a book, in your phone, and looking away, looking back and reading and seeing if it changed, or even trying to consciously change it and see if it changes. Same thing with digital screens, the little time on the microwave, the time on your phone, the time on your watch. Seems like, at least for a lot of people, gadgets don't work quite right. I've heard of the method, and I've tried that before, of the light, switching the light on and off. It doesn't always switch off. Although I gave this idea to my friend, and my friend has tried the light, and the light worked just fine in his dream. And it took him a while of continuing to test for things before he realized he was dreaming, which was kind of funny. So there's all these things. Again, a good method is looking at your hands and really trying to. I'm not sure why the hands thing quite work, but if you're looking at your hands, I know people use that once they are already realizing that they're dreaming. Once they're lucid, they look at their hands to sort of stabilize the dream, and or not get too excited, and kind of, it's something to focus on so your awareness and attention doesn't jump too quickly and you'll wake up. But even looking at your hands is an interesting way to sort of measure and see if anything looks off or weird to you, and that helps in checking your reality, so to speak, to see if you're dreaming or awake. And a good method to do it is putting like a reminder a few times a day, and I think there's a few apps that can randomize the time that you get a little alert that says, are you dreaming or am I dreaming, and stop to check if you're dreaming. So that's a good habit to get into. And it also connects nicely with the dream journal, because if you I would say that's an added component. I wouldn't even say that it's super crucial, because if you do too many of these things, again, the whole practice might become, for some people, too cumbersome and unsustainable, and that defeats the purpose. I'd rather you do less things but practice consistently than do as many things as you can and just get overwhelmed, or don't keep up doing it and eventually sort of give up and let it be. And what I'm saying is, an add-on to reality checks and dream journals are dream signs. So dream signs, and I've talked about it a little before, is thinking or looking at specific things that appear in your dreams on somewhat of a regular basis and using them as a trigger for a reality check. So forget just the random automatic trigger in your phone. If you actually trigger a reality check, or basically use it as a cue to do a reality check by something that appears in your dream often enough, then that's a great way to increase the chances that you'll do a reality check in a dream, obviously, instead of some random timer that might cause you to do a reality check randomly in a dream. So scan your dream journal, unless you already know sort of off the top of your head all the things that appear in your dreams on a regular basis. If you have reoccurring dreams, that makes it much easier, unless the content of your dreams doesn't appear in your daily life. But if there's a person or a thing or a place that you see often in your dreams, and read through your dream journal and see if there's sort of repeating patterns or repeating items. And when you encounter that person or that thing during the day, do a reality check. Then the next time, if you get into the habit of doing a reality check every time you encounter that thing, that dream sign, but in your real life, if you do it on a regular basis, then you'll do it in the dream next time you see that item or that person. So if you have the time, or if you actually took the time to write a dream journal and you happen to see dream signs and you're doing reality check, then again, it's sort of all little parts that go together. So if you are doing all these things, by all means, and if you feel inclined and have the time to add dream signs, recognizing dream signs and doing reality checks, do it. The next component, and I think again is a very important one between dream journals and induction techniques, is intention. I think intention is very, very crucial. And in fact, it's one of those things that seem to help induce lucidity in people that hear about lucid dreaming for the first time. There's something about just, and again, if this is your experience, let me know, because I still find this phenomenon fascinating. Often enough, not always, but when people hear about lucid dreaming for the first time and they find it fascinating, just thinking about it so much ends up causing a lucid dream that night, or because they then suddenly read about it and think about it and dig deeper into it and contemplate it, and they sort of set an intention, whether they realize it quite so or not. They're putting a seed about becoming aware in their dream, and that often enough ends up triggering a lucid dream pretty quickly, usually the same day. Doesn't happen for everybody, but when I went from just having, a few lucid dreams in my past, in my childhood, sporadically, the ones that occurred naturally, I stopped thinking about it. And then one day in adulthood, I learned or found out about the practice of lucid dreaming and what lucid dreaming is and so on. And that night I had a lucid dream. Now, in terms of intention, you basically take it a step further. It's not just thinking about lucid dreaming, is setting the intention to telling yourself and telling your mind and your brain that you want to attain lucidity. Is that before you go to sleep, and perhaps even during the day when you're doing reality checks, or in the morning when you're writing a dream journal, keep in your mind, in your intention, that you wish to become lucid. So for me at least, if you want me to make it a little more specific, it's when you go to sleep, even as you fall asleep. That's one of the, I think that's one of sort of the induction methods, more or less, is as you fall asleep. Some people repeat it like a mantra. The next time I'm dreaming, I'm going to become aware that I'm dreaming. Or just once as you go to sleep, before you try to fall asleep, you say to yourself, tonight I will have dreams, I will remember my dreams, and in my dreams I will become lucid, I will become aware that I am dreaming in the dream. Something like that. You can have your own version or your own variation. And say it to yourself, say it with intention, and that helps set your mind towards it. Again, it's something that goes into the subconscious that might help you become aware of your dreaming sort of more naturally or on its own. And that just happens often. If you, again, practice this on a regular basis, I think it adds to the whole effect. So that's intention, but that's a more direct intention, and doing it in a very specific way of telling yourself, because I think intention is in all of this. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're reading a lucid dreaming book or website, if you're practicing lucid dreaming, you already have intention because you want to lucid dream. This is just making it more direct, more specific, with like a call to action to yourself. And I think that helps, and that makes the intention almost more tangible, I would say. And the last component is induction techniques, induction methods. And there are many, and maybe I'll do one episode just about induction methods and run through all of them and give the rundown. I think most people who learn about lucid dreaming right away get bombarded by a list of all the methods and what they can try to do. But I think for now, at least for this episode, I'm going to focus on a little bit, at least, on the one that I prefer, that I use the most, that I found the most effective for me. For other people, it might be other things, but for me, this has been the most successful one, and that's the wake initiated lucid dreaming method. And basically, what that is, or at least the way I've heard also sort of slight sub variations of this particular technique, and people do it in different ways. I'll just give the rundown of how I do it and how I sort of use it the most. And basically, the idea is that you wake up from a dream during the night and you go back to sleep right away. Some people get up and say, oh, get up for 30 minutes or read about lucid dreaming and then go back to sleep. And that can work, and that works for some people, but I, I'm not a big fan of interrupting your sleep on a regular basis for too long, or interrupting REM sleep, or most people still need to go to school or go to work in the morning, or have an actual day, or sleep properly, and can't spare the hours and the time of not sleeping or interrupting your sleep. In fact, some people probably, if they wake up and they get up and they start doing things, or stay up for 30 minutes, they might not be able to fall back asleep. Their brain starts waking up and starts get moving and thinking and so on. So again, it really depends on the person doing this. But for me, it's waking up from a dream and then going back to sleep right away, almost right away, with the intention of getting right back into the dream. I don't know if you've had this experience, but if you have decent dream recall, then you know that sometimes when you wake up in the middle of a REM sleep, in the middle of a REM cycle from a dream, you just woke up, you remember what you dreamed about, and for those of you who fall back asleep pretty easily, then you often go back to the same dream. It was just you. For a moment you woke up, but you go back to sleep right away, and the whole state of mind continues, almost where you left off. And I think this method is trying to lean on that effect and capitalize on it in a sense. So I wake up from a dream. I try to fall back asleep right away, but with the intention of becoming or staying aware. Since I am awake and aware right now, some people describe it as, letting the body fall back asleep, but staying awake, your brain staying awake. I don't really see it that way. I don't believe it. I think your brain still needs to fall back asleep as well. But what really happens, or at least in my case, my experience of it is, okay, let me describe how I do it, and then I'll explain why I think that works, or what that means in terms of falling back asleep with the intention. So what I do is, after waking up from the dream, I recall the last scene of the dream, and I recall where I was or what I was doing. And as I'm falling back asleep, I am envisioning and imagining myself right in that scenario. And in fact, I sort of try to direct that imagination in that scene in my head from where it was, and I see myself moving around, and I see myself realizing that I'm dreaming, or I see myself being lucid and imagine myself lucid in that moment, in that situation where I left off the dream. And I imagine myself becoming aware or doing something that I would normally do in a lucid dream. Usually my go-to, in fact, is seeing myself in that situation from that moment and taking one or two steps and start flying. And if I'm falling asleep, if I'm falling back asleep, as I'm envisioning this, I often go back into the dream and right into lucidity. And that's basically the idea of awake initiated lucid dreaming, is that you're going back to sleep, but you're not just falling back asleep, letting your mind go and just, land wherever you land. You do it with trying to get back to the point you left off, but while thinking about it, while being aware of it, and going back directly into lucidity. So I also would recommend practicing this in different forms. Try to, fall back asleep and maybe do something like the original intention when you originally go back to sleep, telling yourself that as you fall back asleep and you get back into the dream, you'll become aware. Try doing it the way I do it, where you envision yourself right in the point you left off, and try to imagine yourself becoming aware in that situation, or starting off already aware of the dream in that situation, or doing something that you would normally do in a lucid dream. So that's the core basic of the technique. But I will say a few more things about it. One, the reason I think it works, at least in falling back asleep directly into a dream, as opposed to doing this, as you fall asleep, when you go to sleep for the first time, is because you don't go directly into REM sleep and into a dream when you go to sleep. Again, unless you're sleep deprived or you have some sort of sleep disorder, some issues with your regular sleep. So if you do this later in the night or even close to morning when REM sleep is longer, if you wake up during REM sleep and you go back to sleep right away, you stay in a REM state and you go back right into the dream state very often. Not always, but often enough for this to work. And for this to practice this, people who sleep through the night actually need to wake themselves up. And there's many ways to do it. The simplest is an alarm clock. If you have, again, that's I think part of what all these lucid dreaming devices that are coming out will give you the ability to do, is to recognize when you're dreaming, and they will try to alert you that you're dreaming. But if they accidentally wake you up, it's not a lost opportunity. And that's the beautiful thing here. You can then take advantage of the fact that you know that you just woke up from a dream, try to think about what you were just dreaming, and do a wake initiated lucid dreaming method right back into sleep. And that can be effective. In fact, if you have, many of you, I'm sure, already have a REMI, and I don't know how many of you use it on a regular basis or tried for how long, but I think one of the advantages of that device is, and give this a try, is the nap mode. Because nap mode, you can program it to basically, I don't remember what's the shortest amount of time, but almost right away to activate a sequence of lights. So if you wake up from a dream in the middle of the night or later in the night, and you're falling back asleep and you're using the nap mode, so you're turning on nap mode that let's say is set for 5-10 minutes, and you'll fall back asleep within 5 minutes, then you'll have a higher chance to kind of almost guarantee activating a sequence. Since REMI doesn't have a method to detect when you're dreaming, at least when you're dreaming. If you just woke up from a dream and you're probably going back to REM state and back to the dream state, you can set the device to a certain amount of time that you'll fall back asleep in, let's say 5 minutes or so, to activate the light sequence, and then match this way the light sequence to a dream state, and hopefully help induce a lucid dream that way. So again, it's all these little methods. So if you sleep through the night pretty well, then you might have to wake yourself up, and that's why it's not super convenient for everybody, this method. And again, if your hours of sleep are precious and you don't have enough of them, then I wouldn't recommend this necessarily, because I don't want people to really break down or interrupt their sleep too much. But for me, for example, I'm cursed and blessed with, I suppose, I'm trying to look at it as a positive. I wake up many, many times throughout the night. I don't know if it's a sleeping disorder or if it's some kind of issue, or just not very sound or good sleep. Maybe it's just not a great mattress. Who knows? But I wake up many, many times during the night. But the advantage of it is, for someone who loves practicing lucid dreaming, is that if I have the energy, or if the capacity, or if I'm not, really, really super tired, or I, have enough hours of sleep, even though I have to wake up and go to work, is that I can take advantage of the later times that I wake up during sleep and during dreams. And especially if I recognize that I just was dreaming about something, I will take advantage of that and go back to sleep trying the wild technique. So, for those of you who wake up sort of naturally anyway during dreams or during sleep, then you can take advantage of it. If you do have the capacity, then give it a try. Wake yourself up with an alarm or one of those devices. There are, I think, bands like, I don't remember which of them have this capacity, but the Jawbone Up or the Nike Fuel Band or the Fitbit Force, or one of them. And again, there's many other devices that track your sleep. And some of them, I think the Jawbone Up can connect to the iPhone with sort of alerts that if something happens, activate an alert. There's a cool service called If This Then That, which you can sort of create a little recipe of, if something happens, do this. And I think it connects with the Jawbone Up, where you can say, I think that if you are sleeping and hit a certain sleep state, or stage of sleep, then activate an alarm, for example. So that's a sort of more crude lucid dreaming method or wake up method to make sure you wake up during a dream or in the middle of a dream. But it might work, so you can look into that. But whatever the method is, if you wake up late and try to aim it later in the night when your REM sleep is longer, to wake up, think about what you were just dreaming, go back to sleep, try to fall back asleep, imagining and thinking about yourself in that situation, in that dream, from the same point you left, and becoming lucid. So give it a go. Let me know how it works. If you've done this before, if you have little different nuances than my own for this particular method, let me know what it is, and I'll be happy to share it. I think the whole beautiful thing about the lucid dreaming community is everybody loves to help everybody else, and we're all trying to sort of test new methods and see what works for everybody, because it's not such a cut and dry, black and white kind of method and kind of system. It's something that we're learning as we go, and different people react differently to these things. But as I said, for me to go back to sleep and imagine that I'm flying right away works often because, and this is a little point I wanted to mention, because I'm very curious of other people's experience, and I'm not sure what the reason this is for this, but I am curious, is that especially when I had lucid dreams as a kid, before it became a practice, but even after it became a practice, lucid dreaming is always connected with flying in dreams. And in fact, it started by every time I had a dream about flying, I would become lucid and I would become aware. During flying, it was almost 100% of the times, and it is fascinating. There's got to be a reason, there's got to be some connection. Perhaps people who are into dream interpretation can tell me what the symbolism is of flying, or in psychology, if there's a reason why flying maybe is an indication of a state of consciousness or awareness, or I think it connects to freedom, obviously, but for some reason, every time I was dreaming about flying, I would become lucid. And coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally actually, every time I would become lucid in a dream, let's say on purpose especially, or by accident, but when I was not flying, literally almost always my first inclination is to start flying. And I almost can't help it. One, because it's one of the most fun activities you can do while dreaming, but I think also because there is some connection between the experience of flying in a dream and awareness and lucidity. Of course, later on, I had to curb that instinct, because I wanted to try different things in a dream. But I almost always can't help but want to try to fly, or right away to jump. And to me personally also helps kind of cement lucidity when I gain it, because it's not always high levels of lucidity. It's sort of a faint kind of light lucidity. It's like, hey, I'm dreaming, but I don't have quite the control over a dream. And trying to fly is always helps, at least me. Sometimes it's a little clunky and I sort of hover above the ground for a little bit, but it's always a fun experience. So there's some connection there, and I'm curious to know what your experience of it is. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please let me know if you try Wild. If you've never tried it before, definitely let me know how it goes for you. If you have tried it or you use this on a regular basis and you have little different variations on how you do it, I would love to hear it. So thanks again for listening. You can catch me at lucidsage.com or on Twitter at the Lucid Sage. Sleep well and sweet and lucid dreams.